parents worshiped my golden boy brother and cut me off for chasing my dream. Now I'm the boss, he's unemployed, and suddenly they want me to save him. I'm 29 now, and just recently I heard from my parents for the first time in 5 years. Out of nowhere, they reached out, not just to reconnect, but because they wanted something more specifically, they needed me to help out my brother. David, my brother, is 31, and he's always been the so-called golden child. And no, my parents never tried to hide that. In fact, they made it painfully obvious. Growing up, it felt like he was naturally better than me at just about everything. Especially academics, my parents didn't let me forget it either. They constantly compared us, reminded me how well he was doing in school, and how I needed to step it up if I ever hoped to be in his league. He landed a spot at a top college, and right after graduation, started working for a major company. 5 years ago, he made headlines, well, in our family at least, by becoming the youngest vice president in that company's history. Ever since, he's had a cushy corporate gig, earning well, and living the life my parents had always dreamed of for him. That job title of his, vice president, suddenly became my new benchmark, and my parents wouldn't stop throwing it in my face. It felt like I was always running a race I never signed up for. But here's the thing. I never wanted that 9-to-5 lifestyle. Sure, I get why it appeals to some people, and I'm not knocking it, but I've always had a different vision for myself. Ever since I first came across the word entrepreneur, I knew that was what I wanted to be. So 5 years back, after bouncing around a few jobs and learning the ropes in an industry I was passionate about, I decided to take the leap. My plan? Launch a business focused on sleek, modern car accessories, something I designed myself. I put in the hours, done the research, and even built a solid business model. I figured it was time to share the plan with my parents. Even though they'd always favored David, a part of me still believed they'd want the best for me too. I mean, they're my parents, right? So I waited until after they threw a party for David's promotion. Just 2 days later, I sat them down to tell them about my idea. I expected them to at least offer some advice, maybe even a little encouragement, but instead they laughed. Literally, they thought I was joking. They said it was ridiculous that after all my years of education, this was my big future plan. I told them I was dead serious, but they brushed it off. They strongly advised me not to quit my job because they didn't want to have to explain to people that their son had failed. They were convinced my business would tank before it even began and said that compared to David, I simply wasn't capable. They claimed they didn't want me to fail so badly, so I should just stick to what I was already doing. I was furious, hurt, mostly, so I stood my ground. I told them I was going ahead with it, support or no support. That's when they hit me with an ultimatum. Do what you want, but don't expect to stay in our lives. They said they'd rather cut me off than watch me make a fool of myself. They admitted they were tired of introducing their two sons, one being a successful VP and the other still figuring it out at 25, apparently. They'd been thinking about cutting me off for a while and were just waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. Basically, I was given two options: climb the corporate ladder in a job I didn't love and make them proud, or follow my dreams and be disowned. So yeah, I think you can guess what I chose. I cut ties with them right then and there, and I haven't spoken to them since. David, of course, took their side, which was no surprise. He's always been smug, and to be honest, I never really wanted much to do with him anyway. I've been working with cars for a long time, and that's where the whole idea came from. I truly believe in it. I had seen the demand firsthand, and even though I didn't have their support, I decided to take the risk and prove them wrong. So I quit my job. Bold move, I know, and not something I casually recommend to others. But for me, it ended up being the right one. In a few months, I managed to get some investors on board and officially launch the business. The early days were rough. I was living paycheck to paycheck. Honestly, sometimes not even that. Word of mouth was all I had to market myself. And slowly, people started hearing about what I was doing. Customers started rolling in, bit by bit. Then about a year and a half in, everything started clicking, momentum picked up, and I've been growing ever since. These days, I'm doing pretty well. I've got a comfortable apartment in a great neighborhood, a nice car, and a life that I used to only dream about. I wouldn't call myself rich, but I'm stable, I'm successful by my standards, and I've come a long way from the guy my parents once wrote off. And no, I don't feel the urge to rub any of this in their faces. Honestly, they're not even worth that energy. I haven't reached out to them in 5 years. In that time, I married my girlfriend of 8 years, and last month, we found out we're expecting our first child. We've had so many big moments, milestones, and I've never once felt the need to tell my parents. They've always known how to find me. They could have called any relative and gotten my address if they truly wanted to reconnect. And for what I hear through family, they do ask about me from time to time, but that's all they ever do. Ask, they never actually try to contact me. Then last week, that finally changed. I got a message from them asking if I'd be willing to meet. They didn't say why, just that they wanted to talk. I talked it over with my wife, and she encouraged me to at least hear them out. I didn't know what they had in mind, but I figured, all right, let's see what this is all about. So I went to their house, first time in 5 years, and weirdly enough, they greeted me with warmth, over-the-top warmth, honestly, the kind of nice they never used with me, even back when I lived under their roof. So yeah, my guard was up right away. I could feel it in my gut. This wasn't just a friendly reunion. Something was coming. They started with small talk, but I could tell they were easing their way into the real reason they'd reached out. Eventually, they dropped it. They told me they'd heard how well my business was doing, and they'd invited me over to congratulate me. No apologies, no, we were wrong, or we're sorry we doubted you. Just a quick acknowledgement that, okay, maybe I wasn't a total failure after all. Apparently, they were glad I'd proved them wrong and said their doubts were now gone. I didn't really know what to say to that, so I smiled politely and stayed quiet. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. They started talking about David. Turns out, things hadn't been going so well for him lately. His company, where he was once the youngest VP, had been struggling. There were massive layoffs, and even senior management had been let go, David included. For the past 4 months, he'd been sitting at home, jobless, unsure of what to do. They told me he'd been applying here and there, but nothing was panning out. And the offers he was getting didn't match the salary or title he was used to. Naturally, he was depressed and feeling lost. Now, while they were going on about all this, I was still trying to figure out what it had to do with me. I mean, sure, I felt bad for the guy, but what was I supposed to do? So I just listened, waiting for the punchline. And then they hit me with it. They asked if I'd be willing to hire him. Seriously, they wanted me to give David a job in my company. Something high-paying, of course, something where he could bring his expertise to the table. They said he was too down to apply for jobs on his own, and this would help him get back on his feet. I didn't even know how to respond. I wasn't expecting that at all, so I told them I need time to think about it. And honestly, I meant it. I wasn't going to say yes on the spot, just because they suddenly decided to act civil. And let's be real, if their intentions were really just about reconnecting, they'd have reached out long ago. They never did. So yeah, I left their house with a weird feeling in my stomach. Later that evening, I talked it over with my wife. She's not involved in my business. She works in banking, but she knows the dynamics, and she told me straight up, it's your company, your call. If you don't think it'll work, don't do it. She also mentioned something I've been thinking myself. She didn't buy their act, the sudden warmth, the congratulations. It all felt too calculated. So after some thought, I decided not to go through with it. I wasn't going to hire David. We've never been close. We've never worked well together. And I wasn't about to jeopardize the company I built from the ground up just to satisfy my parents' sense of family pride. I didn't feel like telling them that, though. Not right away. I figure if I said no outright, they'd twist it and make me the villain, so I didn't reply at all. But they kept pushing, texting me every day asking if I made a decision. I ignore the messages. Then 2 days ago, they called. They said they needed an answer, so I gave them one. I told them I'd thought it through and decided I wasn't comfortable hiring David. I explained that our relationship had never been strong, and bringing him into my business wouldn't be a good move for anyone. That was it. I was calm, direct. And they lost it. Suddenly, I was the ungrateful son. They started yelling, going off about how they'd raised me, paid for everything when I was a kid, and how now that they needed help, I was turning my back on them. They said I was acting like I didn't owe them anything. Honestly, I was stunned. I mean, they raised me. I didn't exactly have a choice in that. That's what parents are supposed to do, right? But that wasn't even the point. I tried to explain again, calmly, that this had nothing to do with holding a grudge. I just didn't think I could work with David. That's it. Business is business. But they weren't having it. They said the only reason they reached out was because they thought enough time had passed for us to move on. That now that I was finally doing well, I'd stop being petty and help the family out. They said David would have done the same for me. That if my business had failed, they would have supported me. That part really got me, because 5 years ago, they didn't support me. When I needed them the most, they shut the door in my face and cut me off. And now, they wanted me to act like none of that ever happened. The whole thing spiraled. The argument got heated fast. Eventually, I just said, I don't want to do this anymore, and hung up. After that call, I blocked their numbers. But honestly, ever since then, I've been caught in this weird emotional mess. I keep thinking about the stuff they said, how if the roles were reversed, they would have helped me, and it messes with my head. Even though I know better, I've talked about it with my wife a few times, and she's been a rock. She keeps reminding me they're only saying that because I'm not the one who's struggling, and this is just manipulation wrapped up in fake guilt. She's right. They haven't apologized, haven't taken accountability, and yet they expect me to bail David out like none of that matters. And it's not like David was ever good to me. When we were kids, he was part of the crowd that constantly picked on me. So yeah, I know she's right, but that guilt, it still lingers. It's like this annoying background noise I can't mute. And it's made me second guess myself a few times. So yeah, AITA for refusing to hire my brother after he lost his corporate job. Update 1. Thank you all for responding to my post. It's been a little while since I last spoke to my parents, and honestly, I've made peace with the fact that what I did really wasn't that outrageous. David will find a job eventually. I just don't want that job to be with me. That's all there is to it. My wife and I have agreed to stick to our decision, but my parents are not letting it go, apparently. They've now decided to rewrite the whole situation and tell people I've always been jealous of David and that I'm enjoying this power trip or whatever, which is insane. They've been texting every single relative they can think of, actively bringing up the story, making it sound like I'm out for revenge or something. Most of these people weren't even asking. They're just getting unsolicited messages from my parents, trying to drag them into this drama. It's desperate, honestly, and I'm not playing into it. I've blocked them, and no matter how dramatic they get, I'm not unblocking them just to argue. Some of the relatives did reach out to me, shared screenshots, asked what was going on, and I explained everything. Most of them already had a general idea, since it's no secret that my parents and I haven't spoken in years, even during family gatherings, so it's not like this sudden rift was a surprise to anyone. Thankfully, the people I did talk to were understanding. They assured me they weren't buying into the narrative my parents were pushing. They know how things have been in the past, and they know how my parents can be. That support? It's been a relief. And right now, I've got bigger things to focus on, like the fact that my wife is pregnant. Yep, we were going to announce it for a few more weeks, but honestly, with everything going on, we're thinking of sharing the news early. Maybe it'll send the message that this nonsense isn't our priority anymore, that we've moved on. Not sure if it'll work, though. My parents can be unbelievably cold, and I wouldn't put it past them to stir up drama, even knowing she's pregnant. That's just how they are. Update 2. So, we went ahead and made the pregnancy announcement on social media a couple of days ago. It's been around 10 days since I last heard anything from my parents. A lot of family reached out to congratulate us, which was really nice. But then, I got an email. Anonymous sender. The message said something along the lines of, "Your child is going to suffer because of what you're doing to your family." I don't need to guess who it came from. I know it was my parents. No one else in our lives would ever say something so disgusting. So, Val, my baby isn't even born yet, and they're already spewing this kind of hatred over a job offer that didn't even come directly from David. That's the part that still blows my mind. David never reached out to me himself. If he had, maybe we'd have had a different kind of conversation, maybe not. But still, it would have at least been his request. Instead, it's my parents running the show and pulling strings, and now they're lashing out because I didn't play along. I didn't tell my wife about the email. She doesn't need that stress, especially now. She's in the early stages of pregnancy, and the last thing I want is for her to carry that kind of weight. But man, it stung. Reading those like a punch to the gut. I keep reminding myself, this isn't about me being cruel. I didn't do anything to hurt anyone. I just made a choice to protect the life I've built and the family I'm building, and I'm standing by it. I decided to deal with it myself. I didn't want to unblock my parents, but I knew I couldn't let that disgusting email slide either. So I went over to their house to speak with them face to face. I figure maybe if they saw me in person, they'd finally take responsibility, but they didn't even open the door. They knew what they'd done, and they didn't want to face me, so I stood outside and said what I had to say anyway. Honestly, I lost it. I was furious. I yelled loud enough for them to hear every single word through those walls. I told them they had no right to say something so vile, especially after the way they treated me growing up. I reminded them of how they made me feel like I didn't belong, like I wasn't even part of the family, and now, just because I found some success, suddenly I'm worth their attention. Now I'm expected to share it all with David, the golden child who never once had to lift a finger for anyone else. I told them flat out, They were never there for me when I needed them. Not emotionally, not financially, nothing. So what made them think they deserved anything from me now? I said that whatever game they were trying to play, it was backfiring. They weren't pulling me closer, they were pushing me further away. And I made it clear that I never wanted to speak to them again. Even if they came crawling back with an apology someday, wouldn't matter. I was done. I told them not to expect help when they're older, that they'd never meet their grandchild. Then I walked away, got in my car, and drove home. And honestly, I felt free. I've been carrying that weight for years. All those bottled up feelings, all the hurt, they finally came out, and I don't regret a word. I haven't told my wife about what happened. Not yet. I don't want her stressing about this while she's pregnant. And honestly, I don't think I'll say anything until after the baby's born. She doesn't need the extra burden right now. Update 3. So, after that confrontation last week, things went surprisingly quiet. My parents didn't reach out, didn't try to retaliate, nothing. I actually thought they were finally done with all this nonsense. We hosted a little pregnancy announcement party at our house. Just close friends and a few family members. I was kind of bracing myself for drama. I figured they'd try something, maybe crash the event or stir things up behind the scenes. But nope, nothing. They stayed away. I started to think they'd finally let it go. But then this morning, something unexpected happened. I got a call from David. It threw me off because we hadn't spoken in 5 years, not once. He had completely cut ties back when the family stuff blew up. So seeing his name on my phone was jarring. My first thought, here we go again. He's going to demand that I help him, just like our parents did. I ignored the first call. But then he kept trying, called again, then again, sent a message saying it was urgent and that he wasn't calling to ask anything of me. He just wanted to talk, said it was something that had been bothering him for a while. So I picked up, and the conversation that followed was probably the last thing I expected. David told me he'd been in a pretty dark place for the past few weeks. Depressed, withdrawn, not really talking to anyone. He'd been ignoring all the texts, emails, everything. It was only a couple of days ago that he finally opened some messages and realized people had been talking about our parents, about me, about everything. He said he was shocked. According to him, he'd been in regular contact with our parents, and they never once mentioned any of this. Not even a hint that there was drama going on. So he confronted them, asked them if they'd said anything behind his back. And of course, they flat out denied it, played dumb, said they didn't know what people were talking about. But he didn't buy it. That's when he called me. He said he needed to know the truth because he didn't understand why they would do this. He admitted he'd opened up to them about how hard things have been lately, but he never asked them to get involved, never asked for my help. So why were they pushing so hard? Why were they trying to make it my responsibility? After thinking it over, I told him the truth. I laid everything out, told him what our parents said to me, how they framed the situation, how they practically demanded I give him a job to help the family. I told him maybe it started from a place of wanting to support him, but it quickly became about control and manipulation, and I wasn't okay with that. I also told him I was sorry he lost his job. I knew how much it meant to him. I knew he'd worked hard to get where he was, and I could only imagine how it felt to lose it all in one go. But I also told him the truth. We were never close, we didn't get along, and we both knew we wouldn't work well together. That's why I said no. And to my surprise, he understood. He said he wasn't calling to ask for a job. In fact, he didn't want to work with me either, not because of some grudge or bad blood. He just wasn't in the right headspace to be around anyone right now. He said he'd actually been turning down offers because he wanted to take a break, recharge, figure out what was next. It was his choice. But our parents? They made it sound like he was desperate, like he was out of options, like he needed saving. He sounded exhausted, frustrated, like he was just now realizing how our parents had twisted everything, how they used both of us without being honest to either. And you know what? For the first time in a long time, I actually felt like David and I saw each other clearly. So David vented for a while. And honestly, I let him, even though we hadn't been on great terms for years. I figured he had every right to get it off his chest. After everything, I wasn't about to shut him down. So David vented for a while. And honestly, I let him, even though we hadn't been on great terms for years. I figured he had every right to get it off his chest. After everything, I wasn't about to shut him down. He said he was genuinely upset about what our parents had done, mostly because it made him look desperate, like he'd begged them to convince me to give him a job. But that wasn't true at all. And now people had the wrong impression of him. He was frustrated, confused, and honestly hurt that they'd twisted the situation like that. It felt like they'd used his vulnerability as an excuse to push their own agenda. He told me he was going to confront them about it. And then, something I didn't expect, he apologized to me for everything I'd been dragged through because of all this. And for a moment, I saw someone different, someone more grounded, more aware. It actually felt like he'd grown up a lot over the past 5 years. Maybe losing his job taught him something, like the reality that nothing in life is guaranteed, and the pride he used to wear like armor wasn't really helping him anymore. I guess life has a way of humbling you, and maybe that was his turning point. We didn't exactly fix everything between us, but we talked, and that to me was enough for now. Update 4. A couple days after that phone call, David followed through. He confronted our parents, just like he said he would, and it did not go well. They got defensive almost immediately, told him they were just trying to help, that they didn't agree with his decision to take time off, and they were only trying to push him to get serious about finding a new job. But David wasn't having it. He called them out hard, told them they'd been trying to control his life since forever, never really letting him make his own choices, even now, as a grown man. Of course, our parents didn't take that lightly. They flipped it around like they always do. Started listing off every sacrifice they'd made for him. You know, the usual guilt trip parade, stuff that every parent should do anyway. But with them, it always came with a price tag and a scoreboard. It's like they genuinely believe parenting is transactional. Anyway, things escalated fast, and the conversation blew up into a full-on fight. And now, David isn't speaking to them either. And guess what? According to our parents, this whole thing, again, is somehow my fault. Yep, I'm the scapegoat as always. This time they didn't even come to me directly. They took it public, made a passive-aggressive Facebook post full of vague digs and self-pity. But luckily for me, that move backfired spectacularly. Our relatives jumped in immediately, called them out, one by one. They reminded them, not just about how horribly they treated me growing up, but how they'd been just as controlling and dismissive with David. They pointed out that instead of supporting him while he was struggling, they piled more pressure on and tried to manipulate the situation to fit their narrative. It was a mess. And for once, everyone saw it for what it really was. Eventually, after getting absolutely dragged in the comments, they deleted the post. Then, in a final act of pettiness, they blocked everyone in the family. Literally everyone. They isolated themselves completely. And honestly, I'm not even mad. I'm relieved. For the first time, people finally see what I've been dealing with. As for David, he apologized for the past, for the way he treated me when we were younger. He said he wants to try rebuilding our relationship slowly, and I'm open to that. We're not trying to become best friends overnight, but maybe we can start fresh. Still, right now, my focus is exactly where it should be, on my wife and our future. I'm about to become a father, and that's the only thing that really matters.